Greetings, my friends. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Let's Get Gritty podcast with Dr. India White. I'm so excited to be here with you guys today. We are on this show today to talk about grit. Now, I'm so thankful for the TEDx tribe that has been there with us through all of these phenomenal episodes. And now I'm excited to really start digging into the world of education. In particular, math education. I have one of the greatest experts in the math space with us today, who is a rock star in her own right. I don't want to take away from her clout, but I'll tell you this: she is an assistant professor at UNT. She is a mother and she is an author and so much more. On our show today, please welcome with me Dr. Queshonda Kudaisi on the Let's Get Gritty podcast. Welcome, Queshonda. Dr. Queshonda, how are you?
I am good and I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
You are welcome. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, you covered a lot of it. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, a friend, a sister, a daughter. I am an assistant professor of math education. Um, I'm a entrepreneur. I am a nonprofit founder, etc. But most of all, I'm excited to be on this podcast.
Amazing. Look at that. Just wearing so many different hats and helping, paying it forward, genuinely paying it forward. You know, y'all, the thing I love about Dr. Queshonda is she always has a little bit of room for everyone. She's always making room on her plate to serve and to pay it forward. I don't know many people that have done as much as she has done, and it is an honor to have her on this podcast today. So, with that said, Dr. Queshonda, we're going to talk a little bit about grit. So, the first question I have for you is, how do you define grit?
Thank you for asking that. So I know there's a lot of definitions out there of what grit is, right? But I
Right.
really like your definition, being great resilience in time. I remember watching your TEDx talk, and I was like, "This is good. This is good." So I would say I define it the way that you have defined it, which is great resilience in time.
Oh, well, thank you. And, I think when you talk about resilience, uh, what comes to your mind regarding resilience? And, for example, have you ever had a professional time where you've had to use that resilience? You've had to use grit?
Yeah. So I'm an educator, so I went and looked up the definition. So the definition of resilience is the capacity to withstand or to recover quickly from difficulties. Another definition was toughness, and then the ability to spring back. And so I feel like I've had to demonstrate that in so many areas of my life, including professionally. What comes to mind is when COVID happened. So, when COVID happened, I was an instructional mathematics coach at a high school. And I know that I had just given birth in December of 2019, and
Mhm.
I was out on maternity leave. I think I came back somewhere around February, and up until that time, I was a coach. And I think, I was subbing a lot as well, being a
Mhm.
coach, within that school space. But when COVID happened, I pretty much had to take over like classes because
Wow.
teachers left.
Right.
And so here I was,
Mm.
had just given birth, and I was the instructional math coach. Then I was put into the classroom,
Mhm.
and I was doing my PhD. And at that
Wow.
point as well, I was
Wow.
doing my nonprofit and my
Oh
business.
my word.
So a lot of things was happening all at once, right?
Yeah, right.
And so I really had to be resilient in that time to recover from having just given birth,
Right.
recover in the way so that I could continue my studies because that was
Mhm.
something that I wanted to do. Um, and so, yeah, resilience was really needed in that time. And to some extent, I think I displayed it. So that's
I
just one
think
example.
Just a little bit, just a little
Yeah,
bit.
just a little bit.
Just a tad. So, I commend you. My hat goes off to you. And I remembered just celebrating when you did cross over. And I just want to say that, I'm proud of you for all that you were able to
Thank you.
accomplish. And another question that comes in my mind is when you had all of those irons in the fire, what made you, what was that, I guess, that crossing over point um, that helped that resilience to then turn into perseverance, where you were just, that was it. You had all of these things on the table. You have a new baby. You have defending your dissertation. Talk to us about that. What was it like for you in that space?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of things that I can say, but one of the things that stands out in my mind is the passion that I had for what I was doing. Like I genuinely enjoyed the things that I was doing. And
Like it.
the increase that would come as a result, right? Like we were just
Right.
talking about gardening,
Yeah.
right? And so
Right.
when you garden, you put something in the ground or you put it in a pot and you water it, and sometimes it looks like it's growing and sometimes it doesn't, but it's like the faith that something is going to be on the other side of that process. And
Right.
that's really what it was for me. Like I knew that if I continue to push through the pain, sometimes the disappointment, that there was going to be a reward on the other side of that. And
Beautiful.
there were many rewards, right? Like balancing
Right.
all of those things, something good came out of all of that. But it was just the passion and the belief that a reward would be on the other side of that.
Beautiful. So this is kind of like that spiritual time that you've used grit. So have you really had a time you're like, you were just talking about faith. Like was that like a big moment for you or
Yeah, so my faith 100% grounds me in all that I do. Um but girl, giving birth, I that was that was a spiritual moment for
Yes,
me because so giving birth is very similar to a lot of things that we go through in life. And
right.
recently with when I just gave birth to my last little girl, my fifth one, that was a
Congratulations.
thank you, Ava Victoria.
Wow.
But that was I really had to be resilient in that time because it was a struggle, number one, giving birth to her, because I had COVID during that time, and I didn't know if she would survive. I was just in a very emotional
Yeah.
state when I had her.
Wow.
And
Wait, so you said you had COVID
mhm,
while being pregnant.
yes.
Oh my word.
So yeah, when I
Wow.
returned back to work at the school as an instructional coach, this was in 2021, and COVID was still running rampant. I was in the schools, and I contracted COVID like the first week of school when we returned, and
Oh.
I was thinking it was gonna be like past sicknesses that I've had because I've been sick before. And every time I've been sick before, like I rest and I sit in my bed, but I have my
Mhm.
laptop with me and I'm still working a
Right.
little bit.
Right.
Like I've just never been really taken out completely apart from like when I've had surgery. But apart from that, I kind of work through sickness. But
'Cause you're very gritty. Right.
yeah, yeah. So but COVID kind of flatlined me there for a bit. And it was that those connections that I had, my friends, my family, that was there to support me during my PhD. So this was all going on as well while I was doing my PhD. But I had a group of core friends that were checking on me, that were sending me food, and that's like, if you can work a little bit today, we can hop on Zoom and we can do a writing session. And so, I draw some of my strength from them, having those genuine connections around me. Um, and so,
Beautiful.
yeah, that I would definitely say community for me made a difference in harnessing that grit.
That's beautiful. And we talked, I spoke with another TEDxer about, just having a culture of grit within the community as well. And it seems like that's kind of what took place here. So the
Mhm.
community was kind of coming together saying, how can we support you in this time? So talk to me now about how you've been able to take that same idea of having a culture of grit within the community, maybe even now as a professor, as a professor in your own right. How are you cultivating a culture of grit within your community where you are today?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, um, so being new to Texas, it's been, I felt like I've kind of started over,
Yeah,
because wherever I am, I want to connect to the community in some way.
right.
And so just backing up a little bit, I originally moved to Florida for school. And I had spent, from 2012 to 2022 I was in Florida. And during that time I very much cultivated a community. Based on
Yes,
what
you did.
what I was experiencing, I always felt like it was my duty to pour back into others because I had been poured into so much and continue to be poured into from people like you and others that sort of surround me, and pour into me. And so I've tried to do that with others. So, with my nonprofit, I
Excellent.
started an after school program where
Excellent.
I provided STEM programs for students in Title One schools,
Very
because I,
nice.
I grew up going to Title One schools. And those
What is the
programs,
name of your nonprofit?
the name of my nonprofit is Narrow Path Outreach Incorporated.
Very nice. Okay, I'll share that with you guys.
Thank you. And yeah, with that nonprofit, what we did was we offered STEM programs to the
Mhm.
students in the community, and we also offer a summer camp. And so
Beautiful.
in that process, I was really trying to cultivate that idea of grit. Like a lot of those students that came to me were struggling in their academics, and their parents just wanted tutoring for them, right? And I told
Right.
the parents, like, yes, it's about tutoring, but we also want to offer enrichment as well, right? And
Right.
so we provided both of those experiences to the
Beautiful.
students. And at the end of the program, the parents were like, "We love this. Our students are exceeding and excelling." Even today, I got a text from one of the parents like, "Are you doing the summer camp this summer?" And so we're hoping that we're going to be able to offer that. And
That
so
is so
now,
exciting.
thank you. So now where I'm at here in Texas, I want to offer that same kind of thing. And
Excellent.
so yeah,
We gotta
that's
get you plugged into the schools up there. I hope you
very
principals and
much,
educators are listening.
very much so.
Very nice. Um, and so, wow, this is amazing. So, I have another question for you. Um, so you talked about the students and their ability to kind of juggle with grit, but what advice or how do you help people to use grit to thrive through hopelessness in the space that you're in today?
Hmm, that's a great question. Well, one way I do it is just through sharing my own story.
Beautiful.
Um, I've had to try to thrive in a place of hopelessness, and I definitely say that my faith has contributed to that a lot. But on top of my faith, I try to tap into people's natural strengths. And I remind them, like, to remind themselves, where are you succeeding? Because life failure is a part of life. Falling down is a part of life. We all have stories about that. But what are you doing well at? What are you succeeding at? Where are you excelling at? And so I try to remind them of those things and encourage them to build upon that. Right?
Yes. Now, I want to, this is powerful. This makes me think about students that are trying to progress and they're struggling with productive struggle. They're struggling with they're in remediation. We're trying to get them through to accelerated learning. We're trying to get them to persist. And there are those glitches, there's those gaps because there is a sense of hopelessness and there's a lack of grit. So when
Mhm.
you have helped coaches, with cultivating grit and cultivating, I guess, a sense of hope and proficiency for those students, what have been some of the key strategies that have worked for you?
Yeah, so I mainly have worked with teachers in my
Mhm.
role as a coach. And what I try to, the number one thing that I start with is building a sense of community. in your
Beautiful.
classroom, right?
Mhm.
Like starting there at the human level, because we can try to teach the content all we want, but if we don't build relationships first with students,
Not going anywhere.
exactly, it's going to be
Yeah.
very hard to move those students.
Wow. Powerful. So
So that
so the remedial kids, the students that are really struggling to get it,
mhm.
how do you help teachers to build relationships with those students? Because there could be elephants in the room and just different things that the teachers are dealing with.
That's a great question, and I will say that all of the years that I've been a coach, I've worked in Title I schools, and the majority of my teaching I've taught in Title I schools, and I purposely chose to teach in those spaces because I came out of those spaces, right? So
Right.
I entered the space
Beautiful.
with the belief that I don't care if it's a low kid in here or not, they can excel, right?
Right.
So I have that foundational belief because that's who I was as a student. And I was, through the support of teachers and coaches and other people in my life, I was able to rise to the challenge. So I wholeheartedly believe that those students could. And
Right.
so I kind of told that same thing to the teachers, right? And I went into the classrooms with teachers, right? I
Right.
modeled lessons and I
Yes.
showed how I got students not only talking to me, but talking to each other. And guess
Yes.
what else I did? I pulled in stuff from the culture, right?
Yes.
Like nobody wants to sit there and solve for X without any context, right? Like, what is X representing in this case? What is Y representing?
Right.
What is the center of the circle representing, right? So, how could we take the content and overlay it onto culture or vice versa? And
Yes.
so, during that time, all of the students wanted to create a YouTube page. And so I said, well, how much money are they really making on YouTube? So I went and pulled the data and I created a task, and the teacher, this one teacher in particular who taught, the lowest level math in the school, which at that time was and probably still is algebra 1A. He was like, how did you get the students so engaged? Right. And so I tried to walk the walk instead of talking the talk. And
Right.
so what I would say to coaches is go into classrooms and try to model what you want teachers to do. And then have them sit at the back of the classroom, watch you, take notes, invite them to critique you, because no matter how great we are, there's still room for critique.
Yes.
And so that's one of the best
That's
things that I
powerful.
think I did was to model it. And I learned that from coaches who coached me. And so it's,
Wow.
standing on the shoulders and learning from others and then continuing that cycle.
Wow. This is so amazing. And you're speaking my language. Of course, I mean,
Culture,
we've been
culture,
honored
culture.
to write the book Equity Counts. You wrote on that book Equity Counts, and you're talking to educators across the nation. And what is one message you would say in that book that you would hope people would get from your chapter of Equity Counts?
That's a great question. So one of the things I am very passionate about is teachers as advocates for students.
Beautiful.
And there's so many reasons that I say that, but in my chapter of the book, I push coaches to push their teachers to consider how they can be advocates for students. And a lot of times in our role as teachers, we think that we're just there to teach the content, right?
Right. Right.
However, in the standards for preparing teachers of mathematics, one of the things that it says is that um, we should prepare teachers to be aware of the socio political context of education.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is, what forces are impacting education. Um, and, just downright at the school level, there's a lot of factors that come into play. And
Right.
so how knowledgeable are you as a teacher to know what that is? And so let me just give you a very specific example so I can help people to understand what I'm saying. So, when we think about the trajectory that students are on in their math classes, right? So,
Right.
some students enter high school and they go straight to geometry because maybe they took algebra
Right.
in middle school. Some students go to algebra 1A, which is pretty much the first half of algebra, and they do that
Right.
for a whole year. um and then, so forth. So there's many
Right.
different entrances that students are going into high school with. So being aware of that, teachers can support their students to encourage them where to go next, right? Like maybe the student find, and I've been in this situation where a student finds themselves in one of the lower level math classes, but they're exhibiting like they should be in calculus. Like, why are they in this class?
Yes, that's why there's a lot of conversation about tracking and stuff, but we'll get off of that.
Exactly, exactly. And so just being aware of those things. And so when I say socio-political, what I mean by that is that education exists within this political context where
Right.
there are structures in place where where education is formed, and so
Mhm.
understanding that whole context and structure that's in place so that you can better support your students. And
Beautiful.
so that's
Love
what
it.
I would say.
So
Yeah.
so then how do we move forward now? What is your advice and what is your opinion? How do we move forward in education with the help of grit?
That's a great question. So again, when we talk about grit, great resilience in time, and the capacity to recover quickly, I would just speak to teachers and classrooms. And I said this to my teachers when I was a coach, that like you can really only control what you can control,
Yes.
right? Like we can't control if the student
Right.
didn't eat that morning. Like we can't control if um the administrator is just not what
Special.
we exactly. But I push them to think about what can they control as a
Right.
teacher. And
Wow.
what they can control is their own classroom space, right?
Right.
And there's going to be times, like you said, the elephant in the room, where students are just going to struggle. Like students are just going to fall, right? And they need to recover. And so how do we encourage them to have that grit? How
Yes.
do we encourage them to overcome when they feel that they don't understand anything what's going on? Right? Because
Wow.
even as a teacher, I taught classes where, the students struggled, but I saw growth at the end of the year. And so what I did was I trusted the students to do difficult mathematics.
Wow.
I trusted the students to persevere even when the math was hard.
Wow. Now listen, I need you to talk about that because there is that fear of if I expose this child, it's going to be over their head. They're going to be swimming in math and they're going to just lack motivation because they're going to give up too easy. How did you still see a hope beyond that belief?
Yeah, I mean, I acknowledge that is a possibility, right? But then
Right.
again, thinking about what we can control, like I grew up playing chess. And as a chess player, you have to anticipate the moves that are going to happen and the moves that you're going to make as a result. And so, as
Right.
teachers and as educators, I encourage us to do the same thing. Yes, we know that students may like motivation. And
Right.
we know that if we expose them to these hard questions, it may be difficult at first, but push past it anyway. See
Yeah,
what happens, right?
that's
Because
right.
because if I give you this low level question, even if you can't hit the mark all the way, right?
Right.
You are still hitting somewhere. But if
Right.
I give you a higher question, even if you don't hit that
Yeah,
question, you're still hitting somewhere,
that's
right?
right.
And we know that all students don't learn the same. All students are not going to arrive at this one magical place that we want them to arrive to. But if we can get them to move from where they started, right, to
Right.
somewhere else, then we've helped the student in some way.
Wow. This is beautiful. And I think that that's the thing is can we give them the opportunity to try?
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
um stop assuming their destinies before they have shown us.
Mm,
There's a lot of assumptions. Oh, that student's a level 1, yeah, just yeah, don't even, and when are we going to get to the place where we can really kind of clear the slate and just
mm,
say, you might have been in level 1 before, but I'm going to just clear this and have hope that you're going
mhm,
to be at least a level 3, 4, 5.
Right.
for those that are having standardized tests and the levels and all that.
Right.
And that's the thing, is giving them that opportunity, and like you said, exposing them to that higher content so they can have the true metacognition process, become true math thinkers, develop their math identity, and thrive in the math class through grit. So, this has been amazing talking to you about grit, Dr. Queshonda. And so, I want to ask some other questions to you, just basically, um, where do you see yourself as a leader and as someone that has cultivated grit 5 years from now? What do you want to do within education?
Hmm. That's you ask such good questions. Where I see myself 5 years from now, I see myself having made a difference in the lives of students. Um, and what I mean by that is, so in my role now, I'm a professor and I'm a researcher, right?
Right,
So in my teaching, I see myself encouraging the pre-service teachers that I teach in the same way that I encourage my coaches
right,
to move past and move beyond any barriers that they might encounter, right?
right,
Or perceive or believe exists.
right.
To move past that and
Hmm.
to still
Beautiful.
be the best teacher for their
Love
students,
it.
and to engage in equitable practices that support the learning of all students. So I really want to be a professor and a teacher that um, teaches my pre-service teachers in that way. And then when I talk about my research, I my research agenda is part of it is studying how pre-service teachers are learning to teach math, right? In ways
Mhm.
that they can examine critical issues in society. But then also, my second line of research is studying informal STEM learning spaces,
Mhm.
um, and seeing how students' STEM identity is developing in those spaces. And what I mean
Beautiful.
by
Wow.
that is like after school programs, summer
Mhm.
programs, because we
Right,
know we students go to school, right? And we
right.
there's a whole big thing that we're trying to improve there. But students also go home and they go to these summer programs. They go
Yes,
to these
they
after
do.
school programs, and those things impact their learning as well.
Right.
And we know that some of those experiences are quality experiences where they're having quality STEM learning experiences
Mhm.
because their parents can pay for it. But
Right,
then there's other students, right, who parents maybe can't afford it, right?
right.
And how do we allow them that access to those out of school
Beautiful.
experiences? And so
Wow.
I'm hoping that my research can really develop in that area and impact students directly in their out of school
Beautiful.
STEM learning
Yes,
experiences.
that is very powerful. And, I see here that you're also, impacting in other ways. You're a member of the National Council of Teachers in Mathematics. You're a member of Black Women in Math. Yes, awesome. And you're a former FCTM Access and Equity Chair, and you handed me your baton, and we are holding it down over here in Florida. We're so excited about all the great things taking place in our wonderful state, in education. And then you're a member of PMENA, AERA, AMTE, and so many other organizations in Texas. Guys, when I say Dr. Queshonda is the real deal, she is cultivating grit. She is helping harness grit. She's helping to grow grit in so many lives of educators across the nation through the help of even these organizations. And so,
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to ask you. So, as a member and as an influencer in these organizations, how can you use your example to touch the hearts of these teachers and leaders so that they can be grittier?
That's a great question. I recently watched a TED Talk by my cousin. Her name is Dr. Keisha Porcher. She
Okay.
used to be Keisha Woods, so she's married now. But so
Oh,
she did a TED Talk, and one statement she made in her TED Talk was, "How do you do blackness well
wow.
right? And it was something else that went with it. I can't remember it exactly, but essentially it was how can you be your best self in the space that you hold,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
And that has really stuck with me because I'm very much a person who um all that I am and where I am now, I give myself credit for that, but I don't give myself 100% credit for that, right? Like I had
Right.
to use grit to get where I'm at, but there was a lot of hands pushing me in
Yes.
that direction,
Yes.
right? Like from my husband to my friends to my mentors, to leaders. And so in this space, I also want to do that for others, right?
Beautiful.
Like I
Right.
want to be to others what others have been to me,
Yes.
if that
Yes.
makes sense.
Yes.
And so just being who I am, which is to promote access, to promote equity, to highlight the brilliance of Black and brown students, and for all students, right? From students that come from low income backgrounds, um, and just promoting excellence in education.
Beautiful. And I want to say that you have, personally touched my life as well, like when I watched you in action in Florida, doing phenomenal work throughout the state, helping teachers understand what equity was and access and opportunity for all learners. And then you even assisted me, when I was like a deer in headlights and wasn't sure of, the approach, you really kind of was there to help myself and to help the team. And so we thank you for that, and we miss you greatly.
I
You
miss
can
y'all
come back
too.
anytime.
I'm gonna come and visit. I'm gonna come and visit.
Anytime.
You can feed me from your garden.
Okay. So, but listen, but I'm thankful, and you are shining, you are blossoming, and
Thank
you
you.
have been effective. You've been doing presentations and writing articles, and you've been writing books, and so we support you 150%. Do not stop. And
Thank you.
so, with that said, do you have one last nugget for people regarding grit and how they can cultivate their grit as educational leaders?
Yeah. So one last nugget would be um, plan, right? We all know the cliche saying of if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail, right?
Yes,
And going back to your definition of great resilience in time, like time makes a difference, right? There's a time for everything, and plan your time well, set goals,
beautiful.
monitor the progress of those goals, and then try your best to achieve those goals. And guess what? If you don't, just try again
That's
until you
right.
get until you get where you want to be.
That's it.
So
I love it.
that's the last nugget I would give.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Queshonda. Now, listen, do you have any upcoming projects that we can promote and celebrate on the Gritty podcast show here?
Yeah, so I have just launched my podcast with Dr. White as my first guest. So that actually will go live.
And what is the name of your podcast?
My podcast is Math Education Matters podcast,
Awesome.
where I discuss matters
Congratulations.
happening. Thank you.
And
Thank
when
you
will
so
that
much.
launch?
That will launch on February 10th,
Awesome. Excellent.
2023. Yeah.
So, yes, excellent. So, and it will be also, don't you also have a Math Education Matters group as well? So, we have a Math Education Matters podcast that is
Mhm.
launching this February.
Mhm.
Congratulations.
Thank
And
you.
then we have a group. Now, talk to us about this Math Education Matters group. I know it's on Facebook. Talk to us about this. How many members? How did this get started?
Yeah,
Something
so
like that.
I actually I started this group back in February of 2020. That's when COVID happened, and everybody was like, "Oh my goodness, what are we gonna do?" And so, me believing very much in community, I was like, educators across the well, I wasn't even thinking across the world at that time. I was really thinking Florida, where I was at the time. But I'm like, all of the teachers in Florida need to get together and let's be a part of this group and let's share resources and knowledge.
Beautiful.
But then it exploded.
Yes,
Like
it did.
there's people from not only the United States, there's people from like 50 plus
Amazing.
countries around the world, and we all just kind of are there and sharing resources. It's close to 5,000 members at this point.
Awesome.
And yeah, so feel free to join and I'll accept you, and we can learn and grow together.
Excellent. And I'm sure that the podcast will be streamed in that Facebook group for all 5,000 people globally, which
That's
is
correct.
great. So you guys will be able to kind of feed off of each other and that and enjoy and celebrate Dr. Queshonda for being in that space. Thank you so much for raising up and doing that, because we need you in this time. And that is
You're
great. So
welcome.
now to find you in social media, how would we find you on social media?
Yeah, I have a very unique name. So just type in Queshonda Kudaisi and I'm gonna
Mhm.
come up. So
Awesome.
yeah, so just type that in and you'll find me. I will say though, specifically for Math Education Matters, on Twitter we're Math Edu Matters,
Okay.
and on Facebook we're Math Education Matters.
Okay. So again, guys, say that again, Dr. Queshonda.
hmm So find me anywhere at Queshonda Kudaisi. It's spelled on the screen. On Twitter, it's at Math Edu Matters. On Facebook, it's Math Education Matters, and on YouTube also, it's Math Education Matters. So I'm
Okay.
excited to connect with you all.
I'm just making sure that, we can provide that for them. So,
Thank
all
you.
right, guys. So there's that information. And then how else can we um,
Contact me.
keep in touch? Yeah. How else can we contact you, Dr. Queshonda? Is your email?
Yeah, you can email me at matheducationmatters@gmail if there's anything related to math. You can also contact me at my university email, queshonda.kudaisi@unt.edu.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and you can direct message me on social media as well.
Awesome. Well, guys, listen, this was phenomenal. I'm so thankful for you, Dr. Queshonda. You're
I'm
like
thankful
a
for you.
sister. It's so keep up the phenomenal work. Continue to soar. We believe in you. We're proud of you. We're so thankful that you're in the education space. And so, with that said, guys, take grit with you. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Let's Get Gritty podcast. And till next time, we'll see you later.